A retired chef with no military training secretly recorded North Korean arms dealers offering missiles, drugs, and oil inside hotels, bunkers, and foreign capitals. How did an ordinary man get closer to North Korea's illegal weapons network than most intelligence agencies ever did? This is the story of Ulrich Larsen, a sick, unemployed father of two who spent 10 years infiltrating one of the world's most dangerous regimes. And the evidence he captured would shake the foundations of international law. Let's start with who Ulrich Larsen actually was. Born September 14th, 1976, in Zealand, Denmark, Larsen lived what most would call an unremarkable life. He was a professional chef, skilled, hard-working, ordinary. He had a wife, 2 children, a modest home in a Copenhagen suburb, no intelligence background, no military training, no connections to espionage agencies, and then his body betrayed him. In his early 30s, Larsen was diagnosed with chronic pancreatic inflammation, a debilitating, painful condition that forced him into early retirement. He couldn't work, he was placed on government benefits. And suddenly, the man who had spent years feeding others found himself dependent, idle, and searching for meaning. His wife would later describe him during this period as emotionally withdrawn, restless. He spent hours online, diving into documentaries about totalitarian regimes, a fascination sparked by childhood stories he'd heard from East German friends about life under communism. And then, in 2009, he watched a film, The Red Chapel, a Danish documentary by filmmaker Mads Brügger that satirized a comedy troupe's propaganda tour through Pyongyang. Larsen was captivated. Not by the mockery, but by the access, by the idea that someone could walk into North Korea and see behind the curtain. So in 2010, Larsen did something audacious. He emailed Brügger. What if someone went in for real? At the time, the world around him was watching North Korea with growing alarm. Kim Jong-un was consolidating power. UN sanctions were tightening around the regime's nuclear ambitions. And global intelligence agencies were struggling desperately to penetrate the Hermit Kingdom's inner workings. Brügger saw potential, not in a trained operative, but in the most unlikely infiltrator imaginable. This wasn't a spy. This was a bored civilian with nothing to lose, about to step into a geopolitical minefield. Larsen's entry point was an organization most people have never heard of, the Korean Friendship Association, or KFA. Founded and led by Alejandro Caudebenos, a Spanish aristocrat who claimed direct ties to Pyongyang's elite, the KFA positioned itself as a global network of North Korean sympathizers, Western activists, self-proclaimed businessmen, ideologues who praised the Kim dynasty and defended the regime against what they called imperialist propaganda. Caudebenos himself was a character charismatic, grandiose, claiming to be the only foreigner with official North Korean citizenship. He positioned himself as the gatekeeper for anyone in the West who wanted access to Pyongyang. And Larsen, he played the perfect believer. He joined the Danish branch of the KFA. He attended meetings. He organized newsletters praising Kim Jong-un. He shot propaganda videos for social media, smiling, enthusiastic, seemingly sincere, all while secretly filming everything. But the risk was immense. Every phone call could be monitored, every email intercepted. North Korean hotels were notorious for surveillance, hidden cameras, bugged rooms, minders watching your every move. Larsen kept his double life hidden even from his own family. His wife thought he was simply exploring the KFA out of curiosity. She had no idea he was documenting every interaction, every conversation, every slip of the tongue. For months, nothing happened. And then, in 2011, North Korea noticed him. He received an invitation to Pyongyang for what the regime called a solidarity tour. Larsen's first trips to Pyongyang were exercises in performance. He bowed at monuments to Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, cameras rolling from every angle. He praised the regime in hotel rooms he knew were bugged. He participated in orchestrated events designed to showcase the supposed glory of the North Korean state. And in 2012, the regime awarded him a medal, a token of trust, a symbol that he was no longer an outsider. But behind the facade, Larsen was documenting everything: the propaganda tours, the scripted conversations, the desperate need the regime had for positive press from Westerners. Every smile was an audition. Every word could expose him. And slowly, carefully, he climbed higher. By 2014, Larsen had earned a new title: official Scandinavian representative of the KFA. And with that title came access. Count de Benos began approaching him with a new kind of request. Not propaganda, not ideological support. Money. He started asking Larsen if he knew any investors, Western businessmen, willing to put capital into North Korean ventures. Investments as low as €50,000 to start. The conversations shifted from ideology to business. And not just any business. In 2016, Larsen traveled to Oslo for a meeting with Count de Benos. Hidden cameras rolled as the Spanish gatekeeper laid out a vision that went far beyond propaganda. He talked about building weapons, factories abroad, submarines, tanks, missiles. He described methamphetamine labs, disguised as pharmaceutical plants. He detailed how to evade UN sanctions using shell companies in China, Malaysia, and Southeast Asia. Count de Benos emphasized that weapons were the core business, that North Korean technology and experts could be deployed anywhere in the world for the right price. This was no longer propaganda. This was organized crime. Brugge, watching from afar, banned from North Korea after the Red Chapel, decided it was time to escalate. Enter Mr. James, played by Jim Medi La Trache Kvortrup, a Danish actor with a colorful past as a French Foreign Legionnaire and a convicted cocaine dealer. Mr. James was designed to be irresistible bait. He claimed to represent massive capital. He improvised a fake company name, Targa Group, during meetings, adding an amateur yet audacious flavor to the deception. And North Korea took the bait. In 2017, Larsen and Mr. James traveled together to Pyongyang. They were taken to a secret bunker, a facility showcasing North Korean military hardware. Missile catalogs were spread across tables. Prices were discussed openly. In US dollars. Scud-E missiles, with a range of 1,350 kilometers. 240mm rocket launchers. And then, a contract was signed. The counterpart was Kim Ryong-chol of the Nare Trading Corporation, an entity that UN experts would later identify for sanctions violations. The deal outlined plans to produce arms and so-called medicines, a euphemism for methamphetamine in a third country. At this point, Larsen wasn't just observing. He was sitting at the negotiating table, shaking hands with officials who believed he could deliver millions. And then, they asked for something even bigger. By 2017, UN pressure had forced North Korea to abandon prior sites like Namibia. The regime needed a new location for its illicit factories. The answer? Africa, specifically Uganda. In meetings held in Kampala between 2017 and 2019, North Korean officials, identified only as Mr. Danny and Mr. Ri, laid out an audacious plan. They wanted to acquire an island on Lake Victoria, not for tourism, for an underground weapons facility, masked as a luxury resort, complete with an airstrip for smuggling. The discussions were shockingly detailed. Officials talked about displacing local populations through bribes and political manipulation. They discussed routing weapons to conflict zones like Syria, disguised as humanitarian aid shipments on cargo flights. Larsen's hidden cameras captured every word, but the operation didn't stop there. In 2018, a new scheme emerged, this time involving oil. The plan centered on a Jordanian trader named Hisham al-Dasuki. Mr. James would fund oil shipments to North Korea, bypassing international sanctions. In return, Pyongyang would repay him in arms and drugs. In Amman, Jordan, a contract was signed, $3.2 million for petroleum. Count de Benos acted as the North Korean delegate, outlining the evasion methods in precise detail. Ships would be renamed mid-voyage. Intermediary ports would obscure the final destination. False documentation would conceal the cargo's true origin and endpoint. The recordings from this meeting were damning, a step-by-step manual for sanctions evasion, delivered with bureaucratic precision. Further encounters followed. In Beijing, in 2018. In Phnom Penh, Cambodia, in 2019. Advanced weapons catalogues were presented, laser-guided systems, sophisticated artillery, and in the hidden footage, unguarded moments were captured. Cao de Benos, making racist remarks about Africans, his limited proficiency in Korean, undermining his self-proclaimed expertise as a regime insider. By the end of the operation, Larsen had accumulated a decade's worth of evidence, contracts, recordings, proposals that exposed North Korea's illicit networks in granular detail. At this point, Larsen wasn't just observing crimes. He was sitting at the table. By 2020, Brugger and Larsen knew they had reached the end. The footage was too dangerous to hold. The risks were escalating, and the story needed to be told. Brugger made the decision. It was time for the confrontation. They arranged a video call with Alejandro Cao de Benos, and on that call, they revealed everything. The investor was fake. Mr. James didn't exist. Every meeting, every contract, every handshake, it had all been recorded. Cao de Benos froze. The man who had positioned himself as North Korea's gatekeeper, who had boasted of his connections to Kim Jong-un, who had facilitated arms deals and oil schemes, realized the scale of his exposure. He was speechless. And on October 11th, 2020, the documentary was released to the world. The Mole. Undercover in North Korea. A two-part miniseries, 123 minutes in total. Directed by Mads Brugger. The hidden footage shocked audiences worldwide. The contracts, the catalogues, the candid discussions of weapons smuggling, drug production, and sanctions evasion. What intelligence agencies couldn't prove, a chef just did. The documentary premiered to overwhelming acclaim. Danish outlets compared it to a James Bond thriller. The Guardian praised its bravery. It won Best Documentary at the 2021 Robert Awards and earned an 8.2 rating on IMDb from over 106,000 users. But the impact went far beyond film festivals. On October 12th, 2020, just one day after the documentary's release, the Danish and Swedish foreign ministers raised the evidence with the UN Sanctions Committee and the European Union. The UN expressed immediate interest in Larsen's intelligence. Former UN Panel of Experts coordinator Hugh Griffiths, who had served from 2014 to 2019, described the documentary as highly credible and a severe embarrassment to Kim Jong-un. He noted that the evidence aligned perfectly with known activities, diplomatic involvement in sanctions, violations, the shift from Namibia to Uganda, the patterns of weapons trafficking. Ola Kaldager, former leader of Norway's E-14 intelligence unit, called it one of the best private operations he had ever seen. Annie Machon, a former MI5 officer who personally debriefed Larsen and La Trachikovortrup, echoed this assessment, calling it the most impressive private intelligence effort she had encountered. And in 2022, the legal consequences arrived. The United States issued an arrest warrant for Alejandro Cao de Benos, charging him with conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, laws designed to prevent sanctions evasion. But not everyone accepted the evidence. North Korea's embassy in Sweden dismissed the entire documentary as a total fabrication. Cao de Benos himself claimed he had been playing along, that the film was biased, staged, and manipulated. Chinese officials argued in 2021 that the illicitly obtained videos shouldn't be admissible as evidence in international proceedings. And some experts raised questions. Analysts from NK News suggested the deals might have been exit scam schemes, where North Korean operatives string along investors for quick cash with no intention of delivering. Given the regime's paranoia and history of deception, they argued, it was possible Larsen and Mr. James had been played. But arms specialist Bruce Bechtold disagreed. He pointed to the specificity of the proposals, the alignment with known sanctions-busting methods, and the desperation indicated by the regime's willingness to meet with unknowns. In his view, the evidence suggested genuine intent, driven by the tightening grip of international sanctions. And then there was the personal cost. Larsen entered a personal protection program. He and his family adopted security protocols, empty cans placed on hotel door handles as makeshift alarms, constant vigilance. The paranoia of knowing that North Korean operatives might come looking. His wife later described him as an idiot for the risks he took. The emotional withdrawal, the years of secrecy, the toll on their family. Larsen himself, in interviews on the Jordan Harbinger show in 2021 and the True Spies podcast, admitted he couldn't fully explain his motivations, even to himself. But he had done it. And the world had seen. As of January 2026, the legacy of the mole endures. A 2024 article from NK Insider reflected on the documentary's 4-year impact, noting that questions about North Korea's operations remain unanswered. In 2025, the Small Wars Journal called the footage jaw-dropping. YouTube interviews continue to feature Larsen titles like Infiltrating North Korea in January 2025 and Inside Kim Jong-un's Hidden World in October 2025. He now lectures on his experiences through his website, themolex.com, emphasizing awareness of totalitarian regimes and the methods they use to evade international law. Social media discussions from 2024 to 2026 describe the documentary as mind-blowing, shocking, unbelievable. Some compare it to other North Korea exposés, like the Defector documentary Beyond Utopia. But bigger questions remain. Were these real deals? Or elaborate exit scams designed to extract money from gullible investors? Did UN sanctions force North Korea into genuine desperation, making them reckless enough to trust strangers? And how many similar operations are still invisible, still running beneath the surface of international diplomacy? The mole offers no definitive answers. What it does offer is evidence, raw, unfiltered, undeniable footage of a regime willing to break international law in pursuit of survival. It illuminates the illicit economy that sustains North Korea's nuclear ambitions. It reveals the interagency competition, the greed, the amateurism, officials with limited internet access, conducting poor due diligence on fake investors. It shows a regime so isolated that even a retired chef could walk through the front door. And it raises profound ethical questions. Was the operation worth the danger? Did Larsen and Brugger cross lines that professional intelligence agencies wouldn't? Should private citizens conduct espionage operations in the first place? Critics argue the documentary pushed boundaries recklessly, endangering lives, risking retaliation, potentially compromising legitimate intelligence efforts. Supporters argue it filled a gap that governments couldn't or wouldn't fill. In the end, the most dangerous weapon North Korea underestimated wasn't a missile. It was a quiet man with a hidden camera who walked in as a chef and walked out having invaded a regime